when the merchant and diplomat Anselm-Adoners travelled along the Mediterranean on behalf of Duke Charles the Bold in 1470, he reported on an unusual group in the bustling trading metropolis of Tunis. This group was indigenous when it came to language, culture, and way of life, but in one respect they differed completely from their surroundings. They did not wear turbans, but small hoods in a Teutonic style, and lived in their own separate neighbourhood where they had a church in which they celebrated Latin Mass without literally understanding what was being sung. These men of the Rabat in Tunis, with their hybrid identity of Islamic and Christian spheres, were the descendants of a guard of Christian mercenaries that had already been established in Tunis in the 1260s. Due to their loyal services, they had been granted numerous privileges. These guardsmen descended from Latin Christian warriors, and were thus examples of a phenomenon that originated as early as the 11th century. In their history, these mercenaries were often more than just hired muscle for the armies of the Maghreb dynasties, but could also act as diplomats, guards, and important instruments of power for their employers in North Africa, and can be seen as cultural brokers. Welcome to our video on the beginnings of Latin Christian mercenary service in the Maghreb, a phenomenon that lasted up to the end of the Middle Ages and gives us a look into the life of warriors in a different cultural environment who became a staple in different aspects of the cross-Mediterranean world between Latin Christian Europe and the Islamic Maghreb. This video is made available for free thanks to our YouTube members and patrons. We fund our free content through our program of exclusive videos made for our members and patrons, who get 2 documentaries per week not available to the public. Join their ranks and watch the series on the Albigensian Crusade, Fall of Sparta, First Punic War, Italian Reunification Wars, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, Russo-Japanese War, Reconquista, Persian Wars, and War of Spanish Succession, and much more. All this is made for and with generous donations from our backers. So if you're enjoying our content and want to see more and support the cause of history, consider becoming a YouTube member or patron. Join their ranks via the link in the description and pinned comment to learn our schedule, get early access to all videos, voting rights on future videos, and much more. You will be able to watch more than 100 exclusive videos today. Thanks for supporting us. The Christian mercenaries in the service of the Muslim rulers of North Africa represent a phenomenon that questions older concepts of the Reconquista, the common Christian reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula and beyond in a crusading spirit, and its counterpoint in the Convivencia, the idea of religious cohabiting in medieval Iberia and beyond. It is at the same time an example of recent research on coexistence in the Mediterranean region, in which the Latin Christian and Islamic spheres met and found ways to coexist with one another pragmatically. In the course of this video, the life of the Vice-Count of Barcelona, Reverter de la Guardia, will be examined. As one of the first Latin Christian mercenaries in Muslim service in North Africa, his life will provide us with a snapshot of what life as a Christian sellsword in the Muslim Maghreb was like. It is not clear when exactly Reverter was born, nor is his actual name known. Only his epithet, the Returned, has been handed down to posterity. According to the contemporary Chronica Adefonsi Imperatoris, Reverter was a prisoner of the Almoravid sea raids and found himself at the court of Ali ibn Yusuf ibn Tashfin, who ruled from Marrakesh from 1106 to 1143. Moved by God's grace, the Almoravid ruler gave many of them special positions and made them leaders of Christian troop contingents. However, the experienced and illustrious Reverter was appointed commander of all Almoravid troops, Christian and Muslim. For Ali ibn Yusuf ibn Tashfin, Reverter led all wars and advised the ruler and his son and successor Tasfin ibn Ali in all military matters. In the chronicle, Reverter became an important military leader for the Almoravids in Morocco. From the 1120s onwards, the Almohads of the High Atlas, founded by Al-Mahdi ibn Tamat, put the Almoravid dynasty under increasing pressure. A contemporary and close follower of Ibn Tamat, Abu Bakr ibn Ali al-Sinhaji al-Baydak, confirms the role presented in the Latin chronicle. Al-Baydak himself took part in numerous Almohad undertakings against the Almoravids, and therefore should be handled with caution. In his depiction, Reverter is a special figure on the side of the Almoravids, who fought in bloody battles for his employer with the Almohads for supremacy in the Western Maghreb, and was able to wrest more than one victory from them. For this, he was nicknamed the Tyrant by some Arabic sources. The brutality of these battles is sometimes described in detail. Tasfin, who was in Fez, went to Jabal Alad, inspected his troops there, and sent Reverter to Al-Falag. There, he had a battle with the Almohad leader Yahya Agwal, killed him, and brought his head to Fez. All mentions of Reverter in Arabic sources present him as a close confidant of the Almoravid rulers, who led large parts of the Almoravid army into battle, and was on an equal footing with his Muslim employers. Reverter's death in battle is also mentioned in Muslim sources for the year 1144 or 1145. His death is depicted as a shattering event that also spilled over into the Iberian Peninsula. In the above-mentioned chronicle, the death of Viscount Reverter is the decisive moment in the end of Almoravid rule, and is mourned by Christians and Muslims alike. At the time of Reverter's death, Almoravid rule had come under ever-increasing pressure from the advance of the Almohads. More and more groups of Berber tribes flocked to them, making the Christian mercenaries under the leadership of Reverter an increasingly important pillar of Almoravid rule and military might. Unlike many of the Berber tribes of the Sahara, the Maghreb, and the Atlas Mountains, they could not simply switch sides, as the Christian mercenaries were more dependent on their employers, due to their cultural background as foreigners in a foreign environment. Reverter and his Christian troops thus fulfilled an important function of mercenaries, gaining autonomy for the ruler for maneuvering in his own aristocratic hierarchy or tribal structures. The mercenaries were a body of power brought into the ruling structure that was not embedded in the local structures and cultures. One core element that spans up to the men of the Rabat of 15th century Tunis. However, historiographers of the Maghreb also cite two other reasons why local Muslim leaders utilized the deployment of Christian troops. Firstly, there is the statement by the pioneer of sociology Ibn Khaldun. He wrote in his book at the beginning of the 14th century that the Christians brought a particular diversification to the armies of North Africa. Unlike the indigenous fighters of the Maghreb, the Christian troops dominated in battle in a close formation. They thus formed an anchor point around which the Muslim fighters could carry out the feigned retreat and reform again, thus preventing the feigned retreat from becoming an unplanned actual flight. They also directly protected the ruler as a guard on the battlefield. Another function concerned the collection of taxes. It is said that when Ibn Tamad visited a village in the Atlas Mountains, he noticed that many of the children there had pink cheeks and blue eyes. Their fathers, on the other hand, had darker skin and black eyes. When confronted, the men of the village told the Al-Mahdi that this was due to the ruler's foreign warriors who came to the mountains every year to collect taxes. They would throw the men of the village out of their houses and spend the night with their women. Even if this story should also be read with the above-mentioned caution, tax collection was also an important function that the Christian mercenaries of the rulers of North Africa performed in various forms up until the 15th century. At this point, let us turn our attention back to Reverter de la Guardia. Older research sometimes portrayed Reverter as an adventurer who, through his sojourn in North Africa, allowed his hard-pressed family's possessions in Barcelona and Catalonia to deteriorate. The power of the Viscounts of Barcelona had declined considerably in the late 11th century and was under pressure from the rise of new families with closer ties to the Count of Barcelona. An expansion of the possessions and power of Reverter's family was in direct conflict with the claim to power of the Counts of Barcelona. The situation was aggravated after 1137 onwards, because the Counts of Barcelona also had the prospect of becoming kings of Aragon. It can therefore be argued that, contrary to the older assumption of fleeing the responsibility for the problems of one's own family, Reverter's military service was in line with a principle of the chivalric Latin Christian aristocracy, in that he attempted to build up a further pillar of the family by serving Muslim lords in North Africa. Despite his necessary permanent commitment to the Almoravids, the Viscount maintained close contact with his homeland, whereby the surviving correspondence and documents provide information about other motives for Reverter's military service and reflect the close ties between this mercenary leader and his own homeland. This made him a cultural broker and an important communication medium who ventured to cross between the Latin Christian and Islamic spheres on several occasions. The first surviving letter is dated to 1126. In this letter, Reverter asks his lord, Count Ramon Berenguer III of Barcelona, to confirm the possessions to which he was entitled in Barcelona. Reverter promises in return to be a faithful vassal, even from the region in which he is located. Few places other than the Maghreb come into question as such a place. Reverter also asks the court to support his steward Raymond in his care of the family estates, for he himself is unable to do so. At this point, Reverter was already known by his nickname in North Africa and Catalonia, and addresses himself by this name, so it can be used as further proof that he was, at this point, most likely in the service of the Almoravids and had returned once before. Reverter's next personal stay in Catalonia can be dated between May and October 1135. During this stay, he organized some family matters and handed over large parts of his possessions to his nephew, Guillem, before he once again traveled to the Maghreb. But peace at home did not last long. In 1138, Reverter sent 2 letters from Morocco to his new overlord, Ramon Berenguer IV, who had contacted him. His nephew, Guillem, had rebelled against the Count and was now in his captivity. In this letter, Reverter argued in favor of his nephew, who, although not the brightest, was still a liege of the Count of Barcelona. He should therefore be released for Reverter's sake. Other troublemakers in Catalonia, especially on Reverter's estates, were to be sent to him in Morocco by Count Ramon Berenguer. Hence the Viscount would also deal with them as his lord wished. This was perhaps also an implicit offer to send other aristocrats who had fallen into financial difficulties and were therefore notoriously rebellious against each other and the ruling count to Morocco so that they could earn a wage with military service in North Africa. In addition, Ramon Berenguer was asked to send Reverter further news of the count's successes to him in North Africa, so that Reverter could pass them on appropriately in the way they should reach the ears of kings and other magnates in his surroundings. It is clear from these letters that Reverter de la Guardia was keen to describe and present himself as a loyal follower of his lord, by repeatedly referring to himself as such. This suggests that the problem of dual loyalty to the Almoravids on the one hand and the Count of Barcelona on the other was certainly a possibility, but that this did not stand in the way of military service for the Almoravids in the eyes of Count Ramon Berenguer IV. Furthermore, the 2 letters also make it clear that Reverter was well informed about the state of his family's possessions in Barcelona and Catalonia through an established network of messengers that are mentioned in the texts. Reverter repeatedly asked Count Ramon Berenguer IV for help with a whole series of legal disputes concerning estates and revenues, which the Viscount was aware of despite the geographical distance. He even mentions a dispute regarding payments from a bakery in Barcelona that belonged in part to him. Reverter also announces the arrival of a new steward, a man named Robertus, who Reverter described as Vestra homo et meo fideli, your man and my confidant. With him, we see a person who is recognized as a trusted intermediary between Count and Viscount. Robertus should take care of the possessions of Reverter in his absence, so the Count was asked to assist in the fulfillment of Robertus's duties. So clearly, alongside Reverter, other trusted Catalonian nobles served in Africa. It seems that this also did not cause a problem for their shared overlord. All in all, these letters show that Reverter was one of the endpoints of a mutual trans-Mediterranean information network, and that he was far from a simple adventurer who was looking for simple opportunities. The mercenary leader did not return to his homeland until the following year, 1139. Most likely, his war waging for the Almoravids was a more important matter to attend to than a hot-headed nephew. When he returned, he handed over further property to his nephew Guillem and had his possessions as Viscount reconfirmed by Count Ramon Berenguer IV. This act can be seen as proof that the Count trusted his long-time absent vassal in Muslim services. After that, Reverter left Catalonia again. Perhaps he now even was accompanied by his adult son, who now appears in the documents. In the Maghreb, he again fought battles for his employer Tasfin ibn Ali. After losing his final battle in 1144 or 1145, the Viscount was killed, along with many of his men, and his body was crucified. Reverter left 2 well-known sons for posterity. One of the sons was named Abul Hassan Ali ibn al-Rubataya. Perhaps he was born in Morocco and grew up at the court of the Almoravids, and afterwards the ultimately victorious Almohads, where he may have adopted the Arabic part of his name in the wake of his conversion to Islam. Regardless of his religious affiliation, he proved himself in the service of the Almohads, and his Christian origins helped him on one occasion. In 1183, the Banu Gaiya, who ruled over Majorca, at first subjected themselves to Almohad overlordship. Ibn al-Ribataya was then sent as an envoy to keep an eye on the island. While he was initially warmly received as an Almohad envoy, his arrest soon followed, after parts of the ruling family and inhabitants of the island turned against the new Almohad overlordship. He was imprisoned in the citadel of Palma, together where other Christians were held captive. In 1185, he persuaded his fellow Christian inmates to revolt with the promise of their freedom, brought the citadel under his control, and briefly reinstalled a pro-Almohad party in Majorca. Like his father before him, he also died in a battle, fought in the service of his Muslim masters in 1186 or 1187. Berenguer Reverter, the son who may have travelled to the Maghreb with his father as early as the 1130s, returned to his homeland in 1155. Here, he claimed his father's inheritance and received it. However, the marginalization of his family became increasingly apparent. Berenguer Reverter sold the family's castle of Guardia to Count Raymond Berenguer IV. Afterwards, the latter no longer referred to his vassal as the Viscount of Barcelona, but only as the Lord of Guardia Castle. However, he allowed Berenguer Reverter to use his old title in relation to others. In the documents now issued by the former Viscount, there is a peculiarity that increasingly reveals his hybridizing identity. In documents written in Latin, he signs himself in Arabic in a name that was and can be transcribed as Berenguer ben Reverter, perhaps a final sign of defiance against the growing political narrowness of his own homeland. He also signed his will in Arabic on the 28th of October 1167, before leaving for Morocco for the last time, where his trace is lost. He left his remaining property to his son Berenguer and his wife Ermesenda. His son also stated in his will in 1187 that he too wished to travel to the King of Morocco, perhaps to follow in his grandfather's footsteps in the service of a Muslim ruler. He thus indicates that it was quite possible for a Latin Christian aristocrat to enter the service of a Muslim ruler. The example of mercenaries like Reverter and his sons shows one important aspect of medieval Mediterranean life. Far removed from any older debates about a universal Christian Reconquista in the spirit of the Crusades, or a peaceful convivencia, the everyday life of various actors was often heavily intertwined across the borders between religious groups. As far as we can reconstruct, the identity of these border-crossing actors was transcultural and included different cultural traits that were used according to the situation. In this environment, Latin Christian mercenaries became an important source of support for Muslim rulers, not only in their armies but also increasingly in the exercise of power. But these Christian mercenaries were anything but adventurers who left their homeland and religion behind. They maintained lasting contacts to their homeland from the distant Maghreb, and were committed to and informed about their interests in their homeland. The military service of these Christians in North Africa was also known in their homeland and was largely tolerated. From this historical perspective, North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula appear mentally much closer than it had been assumed on the basis of long-held beliefs of religious boundaries. However, during the lifetime of Reverter and his sons, their mercenary service was not directed against other Christians, but against other Muslims, a situation that was to change in the centuries to come, while Christian mercenaries continued to operate for Muslim lords. More videos on medieval history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.